Hello and welcome to Make It Make Sense with Mike and Marie. Of course, I'm Michael Ayala, formerly of Court TV, and Marie Pereira. She's a defense attorney. She was a former prosecutor. She's a nurse, also an advocate on so many different levels. Marie, great to see you. Great we got this opportunity to do a live show today. I've been dying to do it. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be with me today so we could bring this to our Substack audience. What we're going to do today. Initially, we were going to cover the Courtney Clenny case. She went to the courtroom today. Turned out the hearing didn't happen, and apparently it may not happen tomorrow because you're in that area. So we'll see how that turns out, and we'll get folks that information. But what we really want to do is we want to cover today's press conference held by Ben Crump in his position as representing the family of Nolan Wells. He's also representing a couple of other folks. He's representing Daniel Irving. He's a young man in Mississippi as well who was drowned, and there's weird circumstances surrounding his case. There's been an arrest, but not for his murder, just for tampering with evidence. Same thing in the Tyler Smith case. Tyler Smith was a young man who was at a party with a bunch of white folks, and he ends up shot in the head. And the story surrounding that is crazy. Ultimately, the shotgun or the gun found at the scene didn't match the shells. When they ultimately found the gun, the guy who had it had never come forward about it. He admitted that was the gun, but they only arrested him on tampering with evidence charges. So they were bringing that to light in addition to the latest that's going on with Nolan Wells. So Marie, first and foremost, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. I've been running around. It's a hectic day, but I'm glad to be here with our Substack viewers. I'm not going to lie. I'm challenged with the computer, and it was
we all are. We're all
a daunting task to even find it, to log on.
It was an all-day thing for the two of us to figure this out. I literally been trying to figure this out all day. But once you get it once, it becomes secondhand. All right. So Marie, what I want to do is to start us off is I want to play the pertinent parts of today's press conference. So I want to listen to Ben Crump here. He's going to be talking about what's been going on with the case. And then you and I will come out and we'll start talking about some of that, give people some perspective on it, some of the legalities involved. So let me bring up that press conference today.
We are announcing that we have the audio from the officials, and we have retained and are consulting with some of the foremost audio engineering experts to review those audio tapes from the CETO call in its entirety. We also, and Attorney Hertz may go into greater detail on these matters, have consulted President Morial with Oceanic engineering experts to talk about how these facts are lining up. The fact that they say Nolan's body was found in the same location where they say they left him at. And so we want to know, how is that possible with the oceanic tides? We want the experts. I mean, you got low tides and high tides. It's not adding up. So we are going to dot every I and cross every T until we find out what happened to Nolan Wells. Attorney Hertz will also go into a little more detail, and Attorney Park, about how we're trying to coordinate with Dr. Roger Mitchell, who conducted the independent autopsy of Nolan Wells, to be able to inspect his throat that was missing. Also, we are hopeful that they will discuss with Dr. Mitchell the photographs and observations made at the time when Nolan was first discovered, because Dr. Mitchell did not get an opportunity until July 10th to be able to examine his body. And at that time, we know the airways and the lungs had already been dissected and so forth. So we can't tell if there was the presence of water or not. That would suggest whether he drowned or not. And remember what Dr. Roger Mitchell said in his autopsy. President Morial, he talked about the fact that to say he drowned does not draw the conclusions of what happened to Nolan Wells. He said it is equally important to know at what condition was Nolan Wells' body when he went into the water. Was he conscious or was he unconscious? Was he forced into the water or did he go unforced into the water? He said all of these things are very important. And so we're dotting I's and crossing T's. We are focused on getting to the truth, and we stand for the truth. Me and everybody on my legal team stand for the truth, no matter who it implicates or who it exonerates. Yes. We stand for justice, no matter who it convicts or who it acquits. And we stand for transparency, so everybody can see. And that's all we want. We want answers. We're not casting aspersions on anybody. We are saying that we want to make sure everybody who is remotely involved has their questions answered to make sure we have a full and fair and impartial and transparent investigation. And is that too much to ask for these broken-hearted parents?
So there was a lot said there and some very interesting things. I want to begin with the first thing that he said. Now, we know the thing that blew this case open was that audio tape. Some audio engineer online had split the tracks on the tape. And according to her, when she split them up and she's played it and other people have listened to it, people haven't come out and said that it's no good. I did hear one audio engineer say the timing seemed off in some way, but she has said it's not AI. She did this legitimately. He said they now have it and they are going to be giving it to their audio experts to see what the situation is. So quickly, what do you make of that? I think the audio tape is devastating. I think it was given out and allowed to be given out. There's a lot of reasons why it got out. And I don't know if it was leaked or not. I don't think that was the case. The way it got out was the Maritime Division was a separate division from the DA's office. They were done with their part of the investigation. They were involved in that initial tow situation. The jurisdiction of the case was taken over by the DA's office, so they were no longer dealing with an open investigation. So when reporters put in these Freedom of Information Act requests, they basically gave the information out. I'll talk about that in a minute, but quickly, I want to get your thoughts.
I think if that audio tape is authenticated, it is a devastating blow to whoever is trying to make the public and the law enforcement believe there was no foul play. I think if everything we hear as it's translated is verified, those kids on that boat have some serious explaining to do. That's right. They have explaining to do, exactly. Because it sounds like someone was calling out Nolan's name. Someone was saying, is he dead? Someone confirmed he's dead. And then someone really wanted to rush off the phone and didn't have much to say about a boat that was literally sinking when they called. It sounded like there was chaos. And that's what the whole public is saying, that there was some foul play here, and those kids are not telling the truth. More reason why, like I said, what I said from the beginning, they need to get the telephones of everyone. Now, some of them may be lawyered up and don't want to sit down with no investigators, but they should have been locked them down each in a room when there was no time to think, and they would have tried to save themselves and given them the treatment. Small room, you know you did it, tell us what you know. Lying to them, tell them we have this, we have that, because they're allowed to do that during an investigation. They should have brought it all down. Now everybody's lawyered up. It's going to be hard to scare anybody. But yeah, that if the audio is authentic, it's a game changer as far as foul play and who's responsible. People on the boat.
I think it's a game changer in terms of just crimes being committed. If he was on that boat, the people who told the story that they left him on the island basically lied to the police. That's a crime. So that would actually be a crime that we've heard committed on that tape if that is in fact the case. So we'll have to wait and see how it comes out with those audio experts. I question whether at some point before this happened, the Mississippi authorities went ahead and did that. Were they aware that there were these 2 tracks? And in fact, there were 2 tracks. Does it say what this particular copy suggests it says? Like you all said, they're talking about Nolan being, not conscious. They're talking about him perhaps being dead on the boat. So it was chilling stuff. I remember when I heard it the first time. Going back to the tape, the Angela Myers, the district attorney there, she initially said that they were going to not release any information. Now, again, as I said, the Maritime Division is not under her auspices, so she could not tell them what and what not to do, but they all work together. So I'm shocked that even after this request came from journalists, that there wasn't a consultation between the Maritime Division and the DA's office as to what the possibilities were for them not releasing this. I can't imagine that didn't take place, Marie. I think it did. And I think the DA felt that that tape initially, without the 2 tracks, was positive for the case of the friends and family, because it supported their timeline of events, that they left at 4:31, that they made this call. Things ended at about 5:30 or so. It kind of supported their story. And the second piece of information that was released by the Maritime Division was about Nolan Wells, folks saying to them when they interviewed them at the time that it seemed like he had had a lot to drink. So we see this time and time again where information that does somehow get out is negative, right, to the person or to the victim when there's some sort of issue here. So just the optics are not very good.
And that's why you need a person like Ben Crump, who has the interest of finding out what happened to Nolan, to be on the case and to be the voice of reason and the voice of no bias, the voice of just getting down to the truth. Like you said, the people who recorded that phone call regarding the boat sinking, they don't have to answer to the police department. So if that audio tape belonged to them, they could give it to who they want. And what we didn't expect is we heard the part about is the boat sinking, how many feet of water from the female operator, but what we didn't hear was the background before the person actually realized that the maritime people picked up the phone. All of that, I'll call it artifact, which turned out to be a lot of very important fact, because it shows that they were talking about Nolan because physically he was on the plane, on the boat. But to me, it sounds like somebody, who doesn't know anything about the law. But I feel like with this case, I feel like everything should just go out of the window.
No.
Clearly, there was a girl's voice. It was a girl saying, "Oh my God, Nolan,
No
who is
question.
she?" There weren't that many. They need to bring her in or bring everybody in. If they weren't guilty.
We don't know if they brought all those people in, right? We don't know who they've talked to. We don't even know, like you mentioned earlier, if they've gotten all of the phone records, social media records from those people. We don't know. Angela Myers, when she put out her taped statement, she basically said the FBI, local authorities are all working around the clock.
Okay.
So let's hope that's what they're doing.
I hope that's what
we
they're
don't
doing.
know exactly what they're
All right.
doing, but let's hope that's what they're doing.
All right. Let's put our unbiased legal analyst hats on, and let me just say, perhaps the police are guarding the information they have because they don't want to taint the integrity of the investigation. But it's highly likely that there are things that they're not sharing with the public because they're not obligated to share anything with the public because it might tip off the people that they're investigating. So perhaps that's the possibility of what's happening here. And that's my legal
I love your
analyst
prosecutor voice. But you were a former prosecutor, right? So let me ask you. That's exactly what Angela Myers said. She doesn't want to, affect it or taint the investigation. She also doesn't want, and I have to say, she said, if I talk too much about this case, then some defense attorney is going to file a motion saying that I ruined the jury pool.
Yes.
And, she doesn't want to do that either. But there is information based on the statutory construction that she could give out in this case that would not do either of those. but she refuses to even talk. As a matter of fact, until Ben Crump got involved, apparently there wasn't even much contact between her and the victim's family, which I have a problem with as well. But I understand it. So as a former prosecutor, how problematic is that when you're involved in a case like this idea of how much information to give, or is it just better not to say anything at all?
I think the best approach is to use the serious voice and say, we're conducting a thorough investigation. And because we don't want to taint the investigation, we cannot divulge all of the progress that we've been making in our investigation. Just like, remember Brian Kohlberger? They were being accused of being rinky-dink police department. What are they doing? They got ragged in the media. And all the while, they were looking at cameras, they were matching up cars, they were taking trash from garbage cans, and they never had to tell us nothing. They didn't until they had all their ducks in a row, and then they, bam. So I'm hoping they're putting ducks in a row. They're finding who is the female voice. They're bringing everybody's voice who was on that audio tape, and they're saying, okay, because it's not rocket science. There was only a certain number of people, right, on the boat, and we hear their voices. So the girl, particularly, who we think is
Who
saying,
said, oh my God, is he
okay,
dead?
I need to speak to that girl. She's the first one. And if they really want to clear their names, why not just come in and say, this is what I was saying, because they know their voices, they know what they were saying.
Sure.
So if there's a confusion and experts are saying, Nolan, are you dead? But that's not what I said. Come in, listen to the tape, and everybody says, okay, what were you saying there exactly? If you have nothing to hide, you don't need to lawyer up.
Could an audio engineer have made up all those voices? I don't know. I'm not a specialist, but it would seem like to go through a lot to fabricate all the different things that we heard on that tape.
They
I
need
don't
to
know.
come in. The voices are attached to people, and the people we know who they were on that small boat. Bring the people in and have them explain what were you saying there? Because it sounds to me like you were calling Nolan. What were you saying? Zara, explain. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. I want to get to this other point that Ben Crump made, which I hadn't thought of, but I found extremely interesting. They're talking to the ocean experts regarding the low tides and high tides. Now, he was left on this island. Think about this. He was left on this island. There were people there. He was supposedly talking to a girl. Now, we know that girl eventually said she left her to go back to the boat. But let's just say he's on the island. Lots of people on the island. It's really like it's not really an island, right? It's just kind of this sandy, sort of marshy kind of place. How does he end up in the water, disappeared, but it takes 2 days for the body to wash ashore? So did the tide take him out and then take him back in? I hadn't even thought of this. Did it, what time did he go in the water? Did the tide take him out? The tide bring him back in? I think that's a fantastic idea. Talking to ocean experts, they can go back, they can see what the record was, what the ocean was doing and when, that time, not too difficult to figure out. If he fell in the water, there had to be someone that's seen him fall in the water. Maybe they didn't, but then how did he end up only coming back 2 days later? Would the tide records support that? I think that's an excellent idea.
It is, because it shows you the movement of the body. Where did it start? How far did it have to travel in terms of how far the tide was and how swiftly it would bring him to shore?
Right. 2 days. The tide goes in and out every day. I don't have to know that. So when he said that, a little light went on. I said, wow, that I hadn't thought of that. That's really interesting. And I would love to find out what ends up happening with that particular information, because that would be amazing if this is really an important clue in a case like this. You would have had to have dumped him in the water at some other place in order for him to sort of float around and end up back 2 days later. So I find that very, very interesting. The next thing he talked about was Roger Mitchell, who's the ME from Washington, D.C., who did the private autopsy. He had his limitations. I had my issues with that, but I understood the reasons why they would keep the most important organs. I mean, when they sent him the body, why do it? Why make them pay for an autopsy when the most important things are not going to be with the body, right? You're not going to be able to tell much without the lungs, the stomach, and the throat area. But they did it. And apparently pictures were available. And now they're saying they're hoping to get Roger Mitchell to consult with the people who did it here so he can get more information about that initial autopsy, because that's the one that will be able to tell you the most. So two things about that. Number one, yes, that's what they need to do, get him in connection with the folks who did the autopsy here, which I'm not sure they'll do, which I'll get your opinion on in a second. But the second thing is, it shows that there's communication going on between Ben Crump and his team and the DA's office and the folks over on the law enforcement side in Mississippi.
Well, how much communication could there be? You know, I'm no coroner, I'm only a registered nurse, but if they knew that Ben Crump from day one said we're hiring our own independent coroner, why would they have that coroner take away body parts, especially the parts of his throat, his trachea, his larynx? Nothing, no neck structures were present. So the whole time I'm thinking, okay, they know Ben Crump has his own coroner coming. Why wouldn't they communicate that and say, hey, maybe you could even join me as I do the autopsy? I don't know what the rules of coroner sharing is, but if you know one guy is waiting to give a second opinion and the body parts are so, for lack of a better word, perishable, why would you take out his entire throat? So now how would we know if somebody choked him and hurt his trachea? There were just things that we needed, especially in the throat, because in my head it was something connected to his respiration, oxygen. Something happened to that young man, I believe, on the boat. Maybe it wasn't intentional, maybe it was somebody subduing him and accidentally doing to him what that remember the law enforcement veteran who was on the New York train and he was holding back the Michael Jackson impersonator, and he
I think it was
accidentally.
Penny, right? Penny?
Yes. I'm thinking something happened, not maliciously, but an accident.
Could have been
And
an
it had
accident,
to
yeah. They
start
panicked.
with his respiration. So now we don't even have the structures to be able to tell. You know how when somebody's murdered through strangulation, they say, you know, there was damage to his trachea. What communication? Because they didn't save him nothing to look at, but almost an empty shell. I was so annoyed.
Nothing they sent them would have allowed them to figure out what actually happened to the body. And so again, they're hoping to get this communication thing going where Roger Mitchell, the ME from DC, will be able to come and sort of communicate with them about what they found, which sounds reasonable, but again, they don't have to do that. And if the past is any prediction of the future, I don't think they will do that. I don't think they feel obligated to do that, and I don't think they will. And the big questions, as mentioned by Ben Crump, that were told to him by Roger Mitchell is, we need to figure out how he got in that water. Was he conscious, unconscious? Was he dead? And that's what the lungs and stomach will tell you. If there was water in the stomach, water in the lungs, that'll tell you if he was still breathing when he went in the water, all these different things. And again, the bony structures, the hyoid bone was apparently damaged in some way. All these things will tell you what happened to that body. But he also said something that's important. Even if they tell you that, okay, it was a drowning, you can't classify it as a homicide or an accident because you need to know the circumstances of the drowning. Was he pushed in the water? Did he fall? Was that a result of something else? So just because you find out the cause of death doesn't mean you know the manner of death.
That's perfectly understandable, but perhaps if the independent coroner had all of the body parts, he would have been able to see some damage to structures that shouldn't be damaged based on a water-based death. And maybe it would have given him some clues. It's my understanding that when they returned the body to the coroner on Ben Crump's side, the entire structures of the neck was not included in the body transfer. Other parts, yes, but they didn't send his throat structures. And that to me is unfair to the person who's tasked to do
Roger Mitchell,
the second
the
one.
guy in DC, said that it's according to procedure. He wasn't alarmed by it. He said, if they wanted to continue to do testing on it, they would normally keep it. He wasn't alarmed. He didn't feel it was something nefarious. He thought it was normal procedure. That's exactly the words he used in the report. It was normal procedure. But he did say that if you do keep something, it's because you want to examine it closer and further.
Yes.
So that tells you maybe there was something they saw in the throat that suggested we need to look closer at this. We need to spend a little bit more time with this. And obviously with the lungs and the stomach, which are the two most important things, I would think, under these circumstances. So that's also a consideration. The idea that, yeah, they did keep it, but they kept it because they were suspicious. And there might have been some evidence in that throat that could have explained. And again, I think of the throat in the area that they kept. And then I think about that red area that they found on the back of his head.
Exactly.
Sort of at the top of that area. Maybe the two are connected.
But why not say something? Why not be transparent? This is normal procedure, but this is not a normal case. Yes. So you have all of these eyes on it. You have the public making all sorts of assumptions and insinuations. Why not just say, we are unable to tell you all the details, but there were suspicious things in the neck structures that require further investigation.
Well, don't even say suspicious, right? That's a loaded word. Just say we kept it because for further examination. That's all you need to say. That's it. You know, suspicious becomes a little weird, but just say we kept it for further examination. I agree. Look, I've been pushing and I've been writing and I've been posting. Transparency is so important, especially in high profile cases. I think we saw the same thing in the Carmelo Anthony case. 10 months before the case even went to trial, the judge decided that on his own, we were going to lock this thing up. No social, we were going to cut off the press. We weren't going to have cameras. We weren't going to have audio. And I think these jurisdictions, they get so used to controlling the process that when these high profile trials come about, they struggle because I think it takes a different approach. This jurisdiction, this is the way they do stuff. Let me ask you this. When Angela Myers did leave that tape statement, she said that all cases, with the exception of natural deaths or deaths with non-criminal car crashes, go to the grand jury. I found that shocking. And I found that to be political. Meaning, if you're taking every case to the grand jury, first of all, the resources is crazy. I don't know any jurisdiction that does that. And number two, what it does is it insulates the DA from any kind of criticism because she can always say, I took it to the grand jury and citizens decided these particular charges or not to charge these particular individuals, and she can pass the buck. But we all know she can also control what she brings and puts in front of that grand jury. So I find that odd as well, the way they handle things. I think it gives them more control over the process.
Because it makes them look like they're going through the process and they're being diligent about it, but they're really not presenting enough to the grand jurors who have a very low bar that something happened and there was probable cause to believe that the people being accused of it, right, had something to do with it. So if they have nothing and they come up with nothing, then you're right. They're insulated and no one can say that they failed to tenaciously prosecute this case.
Because what goes in front of the grand jury is secret, so nobody can check up on them and see what they've always said. You can indict a ham sandwich. Well, you cannot indict one as well if that's the result you want from the grand jury. So that has always bothered me. But let me ask you this, and I don't have an answer to this question. If they're going through all this trouble to somehow cover something up or help people, why are they, I struggle to believe it's just a race thing. Like, is it a power thing? Is it, one of the guy's mother is a judge. So clearly, when this went down, you could imagine she's making calls to her people in the courthouse or whatever, because this thing has been devastating for them as well. I don't want to forget that. They've been dealing with a lot of stuff as well. But who are they helping? I don't understand. Do you have a sense of, if you're going to claim that there's cover-ups going on, who are they covering up for? What are they covering up for?
I don't think so much that it's a cover-up that's intentional. I think it's just a way of life, of looking at the people involved, and there is a presumption of innocence and good moral character with the players who are potentially the accused. So they just get a free pass out of the gate.
Yeah, so they buy
That
their
nobody
story and
is,
then they sort of try to
yes,
align things to fix and fit
yes,
in with their story.
fit in with the perfect young men from perfect families, from perfect backgrounds, perfect ethnicities, and we don't do this type of thing. So they start the investigation from that vein, and sometimes it has the reverse confirmation bias, almost confirming innocence before you even investigate. And
Yeah.
that's what's happening here. I don't even know if it's something that's done intentionally. It
No,
just
no, I
comes.
agree. I think that from the beginning, when the investigator said this was an accidental drowning
Yes.
because he had talked to a few people, I don't think he meant it that way. I just think there's this natural assumption that these four very nice boys told me,
Mm-hmm.
that, and they're from good families. I may even know the
Mm-hmm.
mom or,
Yes.
somebody in their family. They told me that they left him at the thing and he drowned, and that's what it looks like. So I'm going to say it's an accidental death. I don't think it's necessarily nefarious. And you're right. Each one of these little decisions that are made then sort of begins to look like a cover up. And that's kind of how it happens. I agree with you. I don't know if there's an actual cover up because so many people would have to be involved. But again, I think you're right. These assumptions that are made by the people who are hearing the stories and about the people who are telling the stories, I think may affect ultimately how things play out in the system. And I think it's been happening that way for hundreds of years, which is why, Black people don't trust the system, right? At the end of the day, because not a whole lot of us look like that in the system.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I want to talk about here that particularly happened today was, and I'm not going to play it, I was going to play it, but another attorney took the dais and he talked about they are now working with the DA's office. The DA's office has actually agreed to work with Ben Crump and his team
Mm-hmm.
because they've received a lot of different pieces of evidence, videos, and things of that nature. They've agreed to work with them to look through those videos and see if there's any evidentiary value. I found that very interesting. Again, they're willing to work with this team, the importance of having a Ben Crump on your side,
Mm-hmm.
to look at this stuff and open up their investigation to this other information. So, what do you make of that? I see it as a positive, provided that they're sincere about it, that they're not just sort of, just playing around and just want to do it for show. I find it as a very positive development. Took a lot of work, but I think I see it as a positive development.
What choice do they have? Because Ben Crump is on
Mm,
it, right? And they
yeah.
don't want him to be the one to solve the Scooby Doo mystery, for lack of a better word, right? They don't want
Yeah.
him to be the one to come out. First of all, he popped out basically with that audio tape. He broke it down, allegedly finding out that that boy was still on the boat. So they don't want it to be a situation where they look like they were rinky-dink cops who weren't paying attention, who presumed everybody was innocent, and then Ben Crump came and solved the mystery. So yes, it's for optics. They probably had a risk management meeting and they're like, listen, if he's offering extra help, we're not going to let him be the head of our department. But if he has extra information and we're all working on the same team of justice and to find the truth, and if nothing happened, we want to know that too. If nothing nefarious happened, but if something happened, we need to know. So let's collaborate together, because if we don't, this is going to create like a war. Okay?
Yeah, no, look, turning that down, I
Mm-hmm.
think would have completely, I think their credibility has been hurt by their silence. I think turning down help from outside of
Mm-hmm.
their own investigation, I think would have totally obliterated the trust in what they're doing. Because, like you said, if the goal is the
Mm-hmm.
search for truth, and
Yes.
I come to you, I could be just Joe Blow. I don't have to be Ben Crump. I could be just Joe Blow and say, hey, I have some evidence that I think could be useful in this case. They can't turn me away. Take the evidence, evaluate the evidence, and then move on depending on how that evaluation turns out. So I don't see anything odd about the request, and I don't see anything odd about them accepting it and agreeing to look into the things that they're going to be providing, which I believe are a lot of videotapes and things of that nature. So there may be evidentiary value in it, there may not, but I believe they had to accept it. I agree. Their hand was forced in this situation. Right? And we'll have to see how that plays out, because I don't know. I think we would know already if some of that information was really powerful, because again, Ben Crump understands how to manipulate the media, how to get stuff out there. But we'll see. We'll see. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on, and this is moving away from today's press conference, is other things that sort of played out this week, and that was this guy, Bart Edmonston Jr., who was a friend of Nolan Wells. Everybody had been pointing the finger at him, saying he was the one responsible, because they claimed he was on that boat and he was upset at Nolan Wells because the girl that he was allegedly hanging out with, or wanted to hang out with, or made a pass at, was an ex-girlfriend of his. And guys can be like that, when you're that age, don't, we're friends, there's like an unwritten rule, you don't mess with my ex-girlfriend. That's kind of where it goes. So, that's possible. But people had sort of pointed the finger at him, and he's said over and over, I am completely innocent. And he came forward through his attorney and said, look, I handed over all of my information.
Okay.
My phone records, my social media records. I gave them names of all the people that could possibly know anything about this as far as my understanding of the situation when I was around. And I said, kudos to that young man, because I don't know if they ultimately would have even went to this guy, right? Because it raised red flags for me. I'm like, wait a minute. You had to go to them to give it to you? They hadn't come to you right away to get that stuff? You were in that sort of circle of influence of this group of people who were around Nolan that day, part of his friend group, and they had never talked to you, or if they did, they didn't request this sort of deeper dive information. So I don't know how to look at this. This is definitely a good thing. The more information, the better. But I wonder about that part of the investigation.
The investigation is slow. The investigation seems lacking direction. The only thing we know is that young man is dead and we don't have the answers. The investigation should involve everyone on that boat. The investigation should call everybody whose voice is heard for them to explain what exactly were you saying. It sounds like this. If you're saying you weren't calling Nolan's voice, his name, saying, are you okay? Then what were you saying? Help us to make it make sense, right? You're saying it's muddled, someone, manipulated the audio. Okay, you who were on the boat, tell us clip by clip. What did you say over here? It came out your mouth. It's not.
But look, you're assuming that that's legit. I'm not, I don't know if you are or not. I want to see if you are, but we can't assume that what we're hearing on that tape, based on what that audio engineer did, is legit. She says it is. I've seen her on a couple of different shows saying it's legit, but it has not been authenticated by someone official. So I don't know, but let's assume, I think for the purposes of what you're saying, that in fact those voices are legit.
Then explain what it is that you were saying, that we're all misunderstanding, because we're all riled up. Because according to the interpretation of the audio, we heard his name, we heard, are you okay? We heard he's dead, we heard, oh my God. If you didn't say it, then you need to go on Instagram, have a lawyer next to you to say, I did not say, oh my God, it wasn't me, I wasn't there.
Who needs to say that?
Everybody
the person
who
that
was
they think? Anybody who was on the boat. Yeah, we do know a
Anybody
couple of
who's on
names.
the boat.
Wyatt. Yeah, a couple of other people were on the boat. Sure.
I heard the girl.
But they're all lawyered up. They're all lawyered up. And, if you were representing them, you're telling them not to go and say anything about this. I don't know. Bart's lawyer told him he wanted to come out because he's getting death threats and whatnot that they believe are credible. They're working with law enforcement. They've actually sued some people, some influencers online who are claiming that, he's the one that killed her. So he's protecting himself. But I don't know if I would recommend my client come out and speak to this, because the way the mob is now, anything I say is probably going to be deemed negative.
If I had the girl whose voice is most prominent, who calls out Nolan's name, who said, "Are you okay?" Oh my God. Oh my God is a very strong word, right? If
And it's
she
said
came
very
to me,
emotionally.
exactly. If she came to me and said, "Lawyer Marie, everyone said that I'm saying, Nolan, are you okay? Is he dead?" But that's not what I was saying. What harm could it be for me to arm myself in my most sexy blazer, bring her to a press conference, and say my client absolutely denies that she was saying, "Oh my God," or "Nolan, is he dead?" If you didn't do anything, and I understand it sounds like, is she even a lawyer? No, I guess I'm a mom. And I'm putting myself in the shoes of Nolan's parents. So
Yeah.
I don't care about the Constitution. I just want information.
Yeah.
What do you have to hide? The fact that you're remaining silent behind your lawyer when there's a tape out here and your voice is on it and it's saying, "No, no, oh my God, he's dead."
Cannot
If
be
that's
used
not what you were
against
saying, how
you.
about
We're
you just
supposed to
say
have a
it?
presumption that it's not going to be used against them. But I agree with you. And again, it's such a thorny issue. I
Oh
really have been
my
thinking a lot about
God.
this idea of what information could have stemmed the tide of what we're seeing right now. I mean, we've got some of the biggest national names. Nancy Grace is on this story,
I
right?
was on with Nancy Grace.
I did see
Me and
you on.
Nancy
That's
were
right. I
on
did
it.
see you on. That
That's
comes in a
right.
close second to being on with me, but that's a whole nother story. But yes, I did see you on with Nancy
Nancy's
Grace.
on the
You're right.
case.
She is way on this case. And I truly, the message that she's putting out is, people are just trying to get to the truth. Like there's so much hate being thrown at this family. But what they're doing is, and Ben Crump has said this over and over, we're not accusing anyone. We just want to follow the evidence to whomever. If it goes to accidental, this family can rest. It's not about, pointing the finger at these four friends or anything. It's just making sure that you guys are doing your job and not letting the things that are important fall through the cracks. So I agree with him. Another move that they're making is they have sent out letters of preservation to all the family members. What that is in anticipation of possible civil litigation surrounding this case, and that we'll talk about that in a minute, they've sent these letters out to the family saying you have to preserve all sorts of information, communications, text messages, direct messages, group chats, emails, digital media, unedited photos, video footage, audio clips,
That's right.
device location data. So on
That's
your
right.
phone, if
That's
it, and on your, let's say a watch has that location data, you have to protect all of that. They've sent this out saying this is in anticipation of possible civil litigation. What this does is if after receiving that letter, any one of those people that received it, if they get rid of information after that date, and it can be shown that that's what they did, there is an instruction given in civil court by the judge that there's a presumption that that would have been damaging information. So it's really smart. And what it is it's an attempt to hold on to information. But let me ask you, number one, it's real smart, right? Because you know what civil court does.
Exactly.
But if things don't work out on the criminal side, I can certainly see maybe going into civil court because you can get more discovery, do depositions, and maybe gain more information. And it's a much lower level of proof.
Absolutely. Because there's plenty of times. O.J. Simpson, thank you. The person is found acquitted, not guilty. I don't even want to say innocent. And the families go to court for wrongful death, and the bar is different, right? It's presumption of, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So the bar is less. And so
preponderance of the evidence, just a little bit more than 50%, right? More likely than not. It's a lot of different ways to describe it.
Exactly. More likely than not, right? It's different from reasonable doubt. So with that being said, if they have all of the information and all the ducks line up, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, and it adds up to whatever, there were only a handful of people on the boat. And if they can show through the evidence that they have that there was a flurry of calls, there was suspicious activity, there was an undetermined cause of death that could help in a civil litigation situation, just because, God forbid, they don't find enough to hold anyone criminally liable for the death, doesn't mean that the families can't go to court and pursue civil action and do a wrongful death claim. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah. Based on the evidence that I've seen so far, and I want to get your opinion, with the exception of that audio clip, I'm not sure I've heard anything in particular. There's a lot of contradictions that I think raise issues for sure, but I haven't heard anything that even would hold up in a civil court. Again, we do not know even 1/10 of what evidence is out there, right? They haven't given a lot of it out. But from what we do know, I'm not seeing anything other than that tape that really suggests they could even win in civil court that any of these folks were available. Again, there's contradictions, there's some weird statements, and I think maybe there's a lie or two, which maybe charging someone with lying to police could get them to talk, but I don't know. But do you think beyond that tape, and if it's not authenticated, if it is, let's say it's not, would there be enough in civil court to maybe win a judgment there against anyone?
There may be, because even in criminal cases where it's a circumstantial evidence case without a lot of direct evidence, you can use, I call it common sense evidence, to speak to the jurors. Like, that person left home, they left home with this person and was never seen again. And that's basically what happened with this young man. They're claiming he left the boat to go be with the girl and he never came back. But the girl is saying he told me he was going back on the boat. When you add that circumstance along with the audio tape, if they verify it, where they're calling out his name, and if they verify the words that they think are being said, it's enough to
Well, that's
bring
game
the
over.
case
No,
to
if they
a
verify the
jury.
tape, it's game over for sure.
Right. So it's enough for them to bring it to a trier of fact, whether it's a criminal jury or a civil jury. I think there's enough there because he never made it to the boat according to them, but there's evidence, if it's verified, that he actually was on the boat because you were saying, oh my God, and calling his name. Explain that. That's why when you're like, okay, why should the voices come on to explain what was being said? Because why not?
Well, I think if it's authenticated, then you've got crimes being committed because there
That's
were
right.
people on that boat who would have told police that he never got on that boat, right? And so I think you start charging folks and see who turns first. That's what I think you do.
Absolutely.
So that's really going to be the huge thing in this case.
Mhm.
But, you know, in looking at when I look at the pictures of that little island where people would hang out, number one, I don't understand why they hang out over there. There's really nothing to do, but it's a small area that you can see everyone. It's not huge. So if they left him on the island, Ben Crump said it about 10 times today. Someone knows what happened to him.
Exactly.
Someone
It's those
knows.
people on the
And that's
boat.
the most honest statement that I can think of about this whole thing is someone has to know. Based on that circumstance, someone has to know what happened to that young man.
They do know what happened, and they're remaining silent about it. And I know everyone has the right to remain silent, but under the circumstances, your silence could be looked at as guilt. And that's just the way human nature is. If somebody is accusing me of being the one that says, Nolan, are you okay? He's dead. Oh my God. And that's not what I said. I would not sit back, hide behind my lawyers and remain silent because all I need to do is provide an explanation. Am I obligated to provide it? Well, no. But me shutting up, we have something in law that says silence sometimes is deemed acceptance. If I'm saying it was your voice and this is what you were saying, and you know what the ramifications are, and you remain silent, then maybe it was you, and that was what you were saying.
Yeah, yeah. You don't protest your innocence, or you don't put it out there. It's certainly the law tells you that you have to presume someone innocent, but sometimes, certainly in the court of public opinion, that ain't the way it works. So, we saw what happened to this guy Bart or whatever his name was. People just assumed because they had, this connection that he was a killer. So it does raise, serious questions. But anyway, all right. So let's put that to rest. I want to get to something else quickly before we end up this evening, and that has to do with this TPS. I know this is something I've tried very hard to keep in the public eye. It's something that's very near and dear to your heart. My understanding is there's been a little bit more clarity to what's going on with that temporary protected status for those watching. The Supreme Court made a ruling that the executive has complete power over these temporary protected status folks who are here. These are legal residents who are here on temporary protected status. Haitians are part of that group. It's about 350,000 of them here. Overall, about 1.2 million people across different cultures who are here on TPS. Well, the government is revoking the TPS for Haitians. So update me. There was some directive recently by the government that put a bit of a charge, put a bit of a scare into the Haitian community. Tell me about it.
They ended TPS. They didn't renew the work permits, and they posted something on their websites. And basically, they were mocking the Haitian people and said, "You don't have to get out of here. You don't have to get out of here. You can't.
You don't
stay
have to go
here.
home, but you got to get out of here.
You
right?
don't have exactly. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here." Which is what disc jockeys say after a party,
No, it's
jokingly.
It's ridiculous.
And then they offered people who want to self-deport $2,600 to go, basically. And people actually have gotten fired from their positions because employers cannot lawfully employ someone if your work permit was not extended. And they actually did not extend those work permits. If you watch the news cycle Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there were employers from all over the place, hospitals, restaurants, tech places, factories, saying I had to let 18 people go, 10 people go, 20 people go. I don't know how I'm going to function in my business. Because these are hardworking people who showed up at work, were here for years, and because of the fact that they're Haitian, held the TPS, and their work permits were couched on the TPS, we had to let them go. This is what's happening. It's happening. The only hope we have now is if the Senate banded together and crossed party lines to help to pass that bill that Ayanna Presley introduced through the House of Representatives, and through a bipartisan effort, it passed, and then now is with the Senate. But the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, never spoke on it and has not presented it to the senators to take a vote. I was thinking, okay, maybe they're on vacation or something, but they're not, because I checked.
It happens all the time, though.
They're making decisions on a bunch of other mundane
Yes, they have
bills.
other more important business, and things
What
get
could be
shelved,
more
things get
important than
tabled.
this?
I agree, because let me explain to our audience the hypocrisy here. Haiti is a country that is so torn by crime and still the after effects of a 2010 earthquake, which is what caused the TPS status in the first place, that we won't even allow Americans to travel there. But we want to send hardworking citizens here, back there, give them $2,600 and send them back to a place that you won't even allow your own citizens to go to. That's the hypocrisy here. And no one's standing up for these people. And that's what really, really upsets me. But let me ask you this. I read a little bit about what they were talking about. And they said initially, well, first of all, you take away people's work permit, you take away their ability to make a living. So whole families are going to be struggling. But they plan to attack or go after, in terms of these deportation proceedings, folks who have criminal records, things of that nature. Is that correct?
And that's correct. And that's what they should be doing. No one here who stands with Haitians are saying Haitians who break the law don't deserve to be deported. But people believe that everyone who's being deported are people who broke the law. That is not true. Everyone is being deported. Should criminals who break the law be deported? Absolutely. But these people who are being deported are people who are hardworking people, who never got in trouble, who are homeowners, who have citizen children here in some cases, and they've never been in trouble. It's a blanket type of deportation. And yes, what they're doing is they're targeting on the people with criminal history, as they should be, but they're targeting people with any existing order of removal. Just because you have an existing order of removal doesn't mean that the order was attached to you being a criminal. It could be for another reason. And then you got TPS. And now that the TPS is over, they can revive that underlying order of removal. And those are the most vulnerable people. Now, there are also people without orders of removal. Those people, in theory, they should receive what's called a notice to appear before an immigration judge to explain, are there any other ways that they can readjust their status and make themselves lawful permanent residents. But it's just devastating because most people don't have a way to change their status, because it's just so many avenues when they keep saying T in temporary meant temporary. But if they never gave them an option, what can they do? Imagine a person who came here after the earthquake as a married couple. And they came here, they got TPS lawfully, and they've been working here since 2011. And they had children here. One is a teacher, one is a nurse. The kids are maybe 10, 15 years old, and the parents are hardworking people. These are not people I feel like deserve to be deported, but at the same time, they were under a temporary program. Give them some other options. I'm not saying to blanketly give every
No, if
nation.
you've come here and you've lived a law-abiding life and built a
Yes.
family for 16 years,
Mm-hmm.
there should be a pathway to citizenship, period,
Exactly.
the end. Now, I agree 100% with you. If I'm going to find common ground with this administration when it comes to immigration, I have no problem if you say, starting now, we're going to really restrict the people who come into this country, as long as you do it lawfully and not based on race, et cetera, et cetera. I got no problem with that. If you tell me that we are going to start getting people out of this country based on their criminal history,
Yes.
I got no problem with that.
Exactly.
But when you start blanketly going after particular groups of people, when you start making fun of people and demonizing people, and you start taking away their ability to work and earn a living when they've already shown that they live according to American values, then I got a problem. You know, I got a real problem. And that sounds like what's happening here.
Exactly. And that's why we need the Senate to pass a bill at least to extend the TPS for the 3 years so that we're past this administration, and so that perhaps they can revisit the situation and do what you said. Evaluate each person on a case-by-case basis and see what they brought to this country. Take away the criminals, of course, but the law-abiding citizens who promote the economy, who promote our culture, our values, and our morals, give them a way to become lawful permanent residents. And then, you know what? You could say, okay, no more after this.
Right.
But for you to just say, go home and disregard what's happening in Haiti, Haiti never really got rebuilt after the earthquake. You have a place where they walked into the president's house and they assassinated him, shot his wife. I personally have family members who have been murdered. No investigation whatsoever. I'm afraid
You were
to go
telling me the
back.
hospital system, the law enforcement system is pretty much non-existent.
There's no judges, no courthouses, no precincts, no 911 if you drop dead on the street or get raped, run over by a car. You could make it to the hospital. They're like, oh, you need to pay for the syringe. It's crazy. Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. But again, we're going to continue to bang the drum on this story and hope that, you know, this sort of lonely voice in the distance is heard by someone who can stand up and sort of, you know, maybe push this bill through and give people an opportunity to work their way into a way where they can have a pathway to citizenship in this country. For the wonderful Haitian people. I know many of them, you being one of them, are just beautiful people, just really beautiful people. All right, Marie, that's going to do it for us today. Folks, thank you so much for joining us and for supporting us here at Legal View and at Make It Make Sense. Marie, always, it is my true pleasure to be with you. I truly enjoy it. It's the highlight of my week. I want you to continue to have a great week. And again, you're going to be getting out there to the courthouse. You're going to try again tomorrow. I don't know if you are or not, but the Courtney Clenny hearing, it sounds like it's not going to end up going tomorrow as well. It didn't go today. She never came to the courthouse. And we didn't find out why, right?
No, we didn't find out why. Her attorney said he was on his way and said he was going to be 30 minutes. The judge was not here for it. And she just adjourned it till tomorrow. And then a court officer, whose name I won't mention, pulled me to the side and said, tomorrow it's going to be adjourned again. I said, is she in the building? And they said, no, she's not here. And we don't know why. But tomorrow, the same thing is going to be kicked over to another date.
All right, breaking news on Make It Make Sense. Courtney Clenny will not be going tomorrow. We'll see if that goes. But if not, when it does go, you'll be in there covering it for Island TV. That's who you're doing some work for out there in that area. So you'll be covering it for them and, of course, covering it for us as well. All right, Marie, thank you so much. That's going to do it for us today, folks. Truly appreciate you joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful